6 goblins block a corridor. You roll initiative, 3 rounds of combat later, everybody's fine, the goblins are dead, and the party moves on. Now here's what happens with those same 6 goblins using the rules that AD&D actually gives you. Today on Greyhawk Grognard. Old school D&D wasn't more dangerous because the monsters hit harder. It was dangerous because the systems around combat made every choice matter. And when you have informed choices that have a real impact, that makes it a better game. It's more than just roll initiative, see if you hit. You have actual choices to make. And there's 6 ways you could do this. There's 6 ways that there's 6 there's 6 ways that the game lets you do this through its rules. Reaction rolls, morale, resource depletion, hirelings, equipment, and treasure as XP. Treasure is the incentive. With those 6 rules in use at the table, you're going to have a much better encounter and a much more fun experience as a player. And don't think that this is just they don't make them like they used to. These are things you can actually steal in your game and use it at your table tonight. They don't make things like they used to. Back in my day, you had 6 goblins, you could do 8,000 different things with them, and we liked it that way. So first up, we have encounter reactions. And encounter reactions are what you're supposed to roll as soon as you find an intelligent monster. It doesn't apply to like giant spiders or whatever, because that's different. But an intelligent creature like our 6 goblins is going to, you roll the dice, and that is going to influence how the encounter goes. And I'm looking at my DM's guide. And remember, this is actually something that's in the current rules too. It's one of those things that tends to get overlooked. And that's not a dig at newer players. It got overlooked back in the day too. But what you're supposed to do is you roll percentile dice, and then it gives you a little table there to show you what the monster's reaction is. It can go from anything from violently hostile, immediately attack, to hostile, immediate action, which is not necessarily attacking. It could be something like threatening or something like that. It can be neutral, it could be negative, it can be uncertain or positive, it can be friendly with action, and it can be enthusiastically friendly and immediate acceptance. So there's a whole spectrum of ways that those goblins could react to you. And I talked about this in a recent video. And this is one of the things. It's not automatically you see goblins, roll for initiative. It's you see goblins and they look at you and they set their spears, but they're not attacking. They're looking kind of warily at you. And one of them says, "What are you doing in our territory?" And then the encounter goes from a straight melee that lasts 3 rounds and you move on to you actually have a role playing encounter where you're talking and parlaying. That is the official term used in the rules. Parlaying with the goblins. So not everything becomes automatic counter and automatic combat and an automatic carnage. You can do that. And it really adds to the game. It also adds to the replayability of a module, because if you're running something like Castle Archmage, and like I run it at conventions all the time. And I tend to run the same levels because, you get like 5th level characters, you want them on the 5th level of the dungeon, it makes sense. By using encounter reactions like this, the replayability of a dungeon module becomes really expanded because it's not the same experience every time you go in it. I can have the same player come into my Castle Archmage game on Friday and Saturday, and he can have a completely different experience because on Friday, maybe the goblins did attack immediately. Maybe on Saturday, the goblins were kind of positively disposed towards the party and offered to bring them back to their lair to talk to their chief. There's all kinds of different things, and it all comes down to that 1 percentile die that you roll to see what the encounter reaction is. Okay, next up we have morale. And again, I'm going to the handy dandy first edition DM's guide. This is page 67. And we have the morale rules. And they look kind of intimidating, but they're actually really, really simple. Morale is 50%. 50% in any given round, the monster is going to break morale. There are modifiers. It goes up if they have high hit dice. There's different things if the PCs are obviously superior. There's a percentage. It increases the chance that they'll break morale. If they're outnumbered 3 to 1. There's things like that. If if the and it can go down too. If they outnumber the PCs, then they get a bonus. It's like that. But they're relatively simple and they're pretty straightforward, and you could probably do it in your head. Just you don't have to you don't have to have the exact numbers that are in the book. You can kind of fudge it, based on what's going on. So so you roll the morale. And it happens at different times. If a leader gets killed and stuff like that, and if the monsters fail morale, then they will do one of four things. There's 4 different options. You roll percentile dice. They can fall back fighting, which is something that you almost never see. I do that a lot in my games, especially in Mad Archmage, where there's all the twisty corridors and everything. The monsters will have pole arms or spears or whatever, and they can kind of back away while they're facing their weapons to the PCs, and it's great to see them try to deal with that. They can disengage and retreat, which is they turn and run. They can flee in panic, which they just bolt down the corridor, or they surrender, and that gives you a whole nother level of options for the PCs to deal with. What happens when the goblins surrender? Are the PCs going to do what? Tie them up and leave them in the corridor to die? Kill them all and slit their throats? There's an evil act. If they're unarmed and maybe bound or whatever, do they bring them with them? Do they put them on like a coffle and lead them down the corridor? It's a real dilemma. What do you do when those 6 goblins surrender to you? It adds another layer to the game. Again, this is more than just 3 rounds and the goblins are dead. It's all about making choices and using these morale rules. You're giving the players more choices. Do we want to pursue them down that corridor? Maybe they're leading us into an ambush. When you're designing a dungeon, that is a great thing to do. Put in those points where, yes, if they retreat, say the goblins will retreat to back here where there's more goblins and they'll ambush any pursuers, things like that. So you can build your dungeons around these kinds of rules. But it's all about giving the players choices other than what's the best way to kill it until we don't have to roll initiative anymore. Now, another thing that older games do more of than newer games is resource management, especially resource depletion. Let's say you're like a 4th level party of adventurers and you come across those 6 goblins. No problem. You just wipe them out and you move on. But what if this is an old school game and you have been adventuring in this dungeon for a couple of hours and your resources are down? You have been soaked of hit points. Even your clerics are running out, have run out of healing spells. Maybe this is the party trying to get out of the dungeon, and that's when they find these 6 goblins. They're low on spells. They're low on arrows or sling bullets. They're low on hit points. They've used all their flaming oil. Now, that same encounter, you're a 4th level party, that same encounter with a half a dozen goblins could become quite a different story, because the fight, the goblins aren't the fight alone. It's all the things you had to fight getting there. And then by the time you get to the goblins, you're so spent, they become a real threat. That's something you don't really see, especially in 5e when you have the short rests and things like that. There's lots of opportunities to regain your health and your hit points and your spells and all that good stuff. In old school D&D, that was much harder. You had clerics and you had healing potions. And then that was it. And you only had a couple of spells per level, until you got pretty high up. But that's the beauty of that idea of resource depletion. Resource management becomes really important, especially even when you think the adventure's over and you're just trying to get out to the surface to find the stairs to go home. And then all of a sudden there's these 6 goblins in there. And then all of a sudden it becomes an issue. So that's something else that, it gives you a reason to manage your resources even until the last minute. Now, the next thing that old school D&D has that kind of got dropped really early, it pretty much got dropped after first edition, are hirelings and henchmen. Hirelings and henchmen are two different things. Hirelings are just, they're mooks. They're the people who hold your torch for you, people who are hired to carry your chests of treasure out of the dungeon, things like that. They go in the dungeon with you, but they have zero morale, and they'll run away from danger, whenever they can. But they're there to kind of take the heat off. Henchmen are little baby characters, right? They're characters. They're kind of split. They're NPCs. They're PC controlled, but it's a little bit of a hybrid. I don't want to go too much into it. It's worth a whole video unto itself, and I've probably done one relatively recently, or not. But having a henchman there is basically a way of having boosting the number of people in the party, and it takes some of the heat off of the main player characters. And indeed, if a main player character dies, you can just start playing a henchman. That happened all the time in the original campaigns, where some of the NPCs that we know and love, you started off as henchmen of other characters. So we have, there's rules for them and all that good stuff. You roll them up just like PCs, and they have their own loyalty, and they have their own they will have to roll morale. Remember, we talked about morale earlier. Henchmen and hirelings have morale rolls because they're not PCs. So in a dangerous situation, they could bolt or they could surrender or something like that, and that's something that the PCs have to handle. But to take the example of our goblins in the corridor, if you have a hireling or a henchman, you could send that henchman forward to scout ahead and see what's going on ahead of you, and report back. So you'll have some idea of what's ahead in the corridor. So there's all that good stuff about protecting your characters and having that array of NPCs or quasi NPCs of hirelings and henchmen is one way to let you do that. Obviously, it also bolsters the strength of the party, because even if you're a fourth level party and you have a couple of first or second level henchmen, that's still giving you more people that are going to attack enemies, and they have their own hit points and they can carry their own stuff. So having them there is a thing, but it is a risk because, as I say, they have their own morale and they're less reliable, than obviously a PC who makes his own decisions. So that's the same. So that's a way of getting you uh, more bang for your buck, as it were. And of course, when the goblins first encounter that henchman that you send ahead to scout the corridor, that will be. He will get that encounter reaction because he will be the first thing they encounter. So that'll also give you a way of figuring out, are they friendly or are they potentially an enemy. And then we come to gold for XP. And this is another thing that changes the nature of the dynamic when you have these encounters, because it changes. And, obviously I just did a big video about this. I'll try to put a link if I can figure out how. And this changes the way the encounter rolls, because it turns the goblins from a threat that needs to be annihilated so you can get XP, into an obstacle between the party and their real goal, which is the payout. It's the treasure that they usually will have. So it reframes everything. For everything from the reaction roll to how you deal with them. It will change that all around. And and I'm not going to rehash what I said in the XP for gold video, because that's it was a relatively recent one. But the idea is, it gives more credence and more heft to those encounter reactions, because if the goblins end up being friendly, then that it makes getting their treasure potentially a lot easier. So maybe you can have them give you tribute for not killing them, that kind of thing. That's something that happened a lot and doesn't happen much anymore. So uh, XP for gold gives you more of an incentive to use those other tools, the encounter reactions, the morale checks, to get to the treasure without necessarily having to risk life and limb in the process. And another thing is the equipment list. A lot of people, I just obviously did a video on this as well. So in a way, this is kind of combining some common themes I've been talking about. But look at your equipment list. It can be as simple as you have vials of oil that you can turn into grenades. It could be as simple as you have a silver mirror. You can use that mirror to look around a corner and, oh, look, there's goblins. So you can plan around that thing. There's all kinds of different things on your equipment list that you can use to mitigate either the encounter itself or in combat. So you can find out that the encounter is going to happen with that mirror. You can help yourself in combat if it comes to combat with the flaming oil, or you could even just have the flaming oil ready to go as a threat when you first encounter those goblins. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use the equipment in your thing, in your character's character sheet to to help with these kinds of non-combat encounters. Okay, so now let's put it all together. You're a fourth level party. You've got some henchmen and hirelings. You've got somebody carrying your torch. You've got another hireling who's carrying maybe a pair of hirelings who are carrying a big chest of treasure. You've been bashed and battered by different things in the dungeon, and now you're looking to retreat with your hard-won winnings. And all of a sudden, you send your henchmen to the corridor, to the corner in that corridor. You give him the mirror and you say, "What's around the corridor?" And he puts it around the corridor and he says, "Oh, there's a half dozen goblins back there." Very quietly, it reports back that there's a half dozen goblins. So now you very quietly put a plan of action in place. You make a show of force. You try to heal. You heal as many wounds as you can. You hide the rest. You're still not doing all that well. This could go poorly, and but you want to make a show of strength, right? So you've got maybe a flask of oil already set to go. If you're a magic user who's out of spells, your fighters are in the front, ready to, weapons ready, and you have your highest charisma character, probably, in Adventures Dark and Deep, that would be your bard or something. In regular D&D, it could be anybody, maybe a cleric or a druid or something, and he goes forward. You don't want to surprise the goblins because you don't want to startle them into hostility. But you make a show of making noise. You go around that corner, and then the DM rolls an encounter reaction, and it comes up neutral but edging towards positive. Now you don't know that. All you see as the players is okay. The goblins are gripping their spears very tightly. They're hunched down. They heard you coming, and when they see you coming around the corner, they kind of you can see the tension in their bodies easing just a little bit as they see you, and they're looking at you curiously. And then the druid who's in the front of the party says, "Hail and well met, noble goblins. We apologize for intruding into your territory. We only seek safe passage to the surface. Would this be something that we could negotiate?" And the six goblins start muttering to each other, and one of them from the back chimes in and says, "Yes, we would be willing to let you by for if you would give us 10 of your pieces of gold." And then a negotiation ensues. Maybe the DM rolls a die based on the charisma of the druid who's doing the talking, and you negotiate down to 5 gold pieces, and but you and then the goblins will also tell you, "Oh, and be careful. There's a black pudding." If you turn to the right, you want to turn to the left, and that will take you to a stairway that leads up. So you've turned this encounter that could have wiped you out right at the end of the adventure into, yes, you had to lose a little bit of treasure, a tiny little bit of treasure, but you garnered some good intelligence. You avoided the encounter, and you're one step closer to getting out. So that's just a really good way of using all these rules to make what could have been just a quick 3-round exercise in rolling dice into, you had role playing, you had you decided we're going to try to do this peacefully, you negotiated, you got a little intelligence out of the thing. to my mind, that is a much more satisfying encounter than just rolling dice for 2 minutes and then we're at the surface. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this one. Please do let me know what you think about this and all these ideas. Wrapping them all together like this. I've been working up to this for a while with some of my other videos. I would love to hear what you've done in your games along these lines. Have you used the morale rules? Have you used the reaction encounter rules? Have you used any all henchmen and hirelings? I would please do tell me in the comments how you run your games along these lines if you do, or maybe if you've heard something and give you an idea and you want to start running it in your game. I would love to hear that too. Hope you're all having a wonderful, wonderful day, and I'll talk to you all later. So another thing that we have are hirelings and henchmen. Hold on. And it's all about let's give the players different things to do rather than let's just find different ways to kill them. Other than what's the other than other than what's the best way to kill it until initiative tells us we other than what's the best way to kill it until we don't have to roll initiative anymore.